Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Kala speaker series. We're going to give people 1 or 2 minutes for them to join, and then we'll start. Okay, I think we're around the time, and thanks everyone for coming to the Kala speaker series. Give me a moment. Let me find my mouse. Okay. Um, a warm welcome to the last Kala speaker series this year, Ming Qing Women's Writings, presented by the Wikidata Chinese Cultural Heritage Group in partnership with Kalasis in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Chinese American Librarians Association. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Grace Feng, Professor of Chinese Literature and RC and EY Lee Chair in Chinese Cultural Studies at McGill University. My name is Greta Hong, the Cataloging and Metadata Strategies Librarian at San Diego State University. I'm the coordinator of today's webinar. Before we get started, let's get to know the groups that planned and supported today's webinar. I'm a member of Wikidata Chinese Cultural Heritage Group. Our Wikidata group proposed and planned this event. We were formed in October 2020 with Chinese American librarians from several institutions. Our group has done multiple projects and presented our findings about characteristics of Wikidata related to Chinese cultural heritage, data models for Chinese women points and historical places, and different data visualizations. You can find more information about our group works on our Wikidata page. I'll drop the link in the chat later, and a few of our group members are here today.
Greta, do you want to share your slides?
Oh, okay. Next slide. I forgot that. So today is the final event of our speaker series supported by Kala. Since 1973, the Chinese American Librarians Association is a leading organization supporting diversity and equity in the library profession. We appreciate Kala's support for this event. The slides and recordings of today's event will be uploaded to Kalasis. As the Kalas institutional repository, Kalasis hosts scholarly works and educational materials from its members and library professionals in the library and information science field. And it also archives Kalas official documents, conference materials, and Chinese cultural heritage collections. Today, we're thrilled to have Dr. Grace S. Feng, Professor of Chinese Literature at McGill University, as our guest speaker. Grace Feng is Professor of Chinese Literature in the Department of East Asian Studies at McGill University. She received her PhD in classical Chinese poetry from the University of British Columbia. She was a Guggenheim Fellow in 2011 and 2012 and has been visiting professor at UC Berkeley, University of Hong Kong, and Chinese University of Hong Kong. Her research interests encompass classical Chinese poetry and poetics, women writers of Ming and Qing China, and autobiographical practices in the Chinese literary tradition. She's the editor of the Women and Gender in China Studies series published by Braille. Her book, Herself an Author, Gender, Agency, and Writing in Late Imperial China, was a Choice Outstanding Academic Title in 2008. We encourage you to actively participate in the discussion and ask questions. You can use the chat function or Q&A function to post your questions, and we will try to address as many as possible during the Q&A session after Grace's talk. So Grace, please take it over.
Thank you very much, Greta, for the introduction, and thank you to Carla for inviting me to give this last webinar of this year. I feel very much honored by this invitation. So let me share the screen, my PPT screen. Is this okay now? Can anyone?
Yes, yes.
All right. So I was invited to talk about the Ming Qing women's writings, digital archive and database. So my talk will be an introduction to this database, encompassing the history of its development and what we have done and what we see going forward. Okay. Okay, so I don't know whether I think some of you would have already seen this and checked this database. This is the portal, and you can go to either the Chinese or the English web page. And this is the homepage, and it is very easy to switch back and forth between the Chinese and the English at the top of the screen there. So, so basically, we were launched the website in 2005 after 2 years of design and constructing the database and inputting the data initially and so on. And so the project's aim is to preserve by digitization women's literary works as a distinctive cultural legacy of China. And of course, women's writings, literary writings, have been rediscovered only in the last few decades. And most of these writings date from the Ming and Qing dynasties. And so to provide researchers and also any interested user free online access to this virtual library of primary source materials in the form of digital images and data. So it would, can be accessed from anywhere in the world. And so our collaborating libraries have, started with a Harvard Engine library, and it's gone on to include Peking University Library, Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou, National Library of China, East China Normal University in Shanghai, Chinese University of Hong Kong, and Hong Kong Baptist University. And so the database was designed by the McGill Digital Initiative group at the McGill Library. And so this is the basic sort of major entity tables for the Ming Qing women's writings, which is my SQL database. It's a relational database. So you see here, the work, so the collections of writings, the sub-work, because there are some collections that are grouped together into a larger collection. And we use poem and poet basically actually to represent poem, could be any piece of writing. So there are some prose, when they enter it, this is the category that it would be entered. And poet is general and author. And then the region. So in our latest update, we do an annual update in December each year. And the new collections and data that we have entered would be published in the public website. And so currently we have a total of 426 collections of different categories of materials. So individual, 别集, 总集, so anthologies, 合课, where several collections are published together, maybe in the family collections. And then we have 诗话, we have collections of biographies, 传, and 谈词 novels by women. So one can for the you can browse the index. So I think if you have used the website, you would have seen actually it's quite easy to navigate and to use. You can read the materials online, or you can search data by title in different categories. So these are the numbers, and I won't because of the limitation of time. And I know you have another event. So I won't go into the details, but you can see that, it's a large number of poets or authors, 著者, and both male and female, because there are also male writers and poets who contribute to these women's writings by writing prefaces or endorsement poems and so on. So this is the search page in English, and and you can switch to the Chinese easily. So what the difference is that for the English search page, you have to enter your search by pinyin. And we follow the Library of Congress convention of, say, for a title, there's a space between each syllable. And so for the Chinese, the user would enter Chinese characters, the 繁体字, the traditional complex forms, and not the simplified forms. So here you see a closer up of the search page. You can browse indexes that you can, if you want to see the collections in the database, all 426 of them, they're grouped according to the type of collections or according to the century in which they were printed and so on. You can click on the browse, or you can do the search. Really, basically, is according to if you want to search the writings, different categories, a poem title or the genre or so on. You use 著作, or work and a collection, and then you can search information. Say on the English side, you can see author and the name, the marital status, and so on and so forth. And so here's an example. We have searched. It's a collection of 诗 and 词, poetry by this woman poet called Guan Ying, and it was printed in 1857. And so then you can see basically this is all the information on the result of the search page that indicates whether her work is included in other collections in this database, and indeed it is, and also what are the remarks about her by her. And there's also for her collection there is a portrait of her that was included in her collection. So that is entered as a separate category. And then another category is called correspondence, and that is the sort of the 书信 and 唱和, so writings that are exchanged or written addressed to others who are also in this database. So when we open this example here of Guan Ying's collection, you can read it on the page turner. There's this portrait of her. The painter is Nong, Zhou Kezong, and even his dates, and then also we have some and this collection is in the National Library of China in Beijing. And so there is a watermark indicating this information. So here are some more examples. So on the right, it would be sort of like you're open the book and you're reading the pages. On the left there, you've clicked on a particular page that you want to print. And so this is for the Da-yin. And so the next sort of stage that we in our development is in collaboration with the China Biographical Database at Harvard University, the 中国历代人物传记资料. And so at the same time, we follow their model of putting all of the data and metadata into an access database. And so this was created with funding from the Luz Foundation for a postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Shi Song, who then worked with our library to create this access database. And it's on this page, the download or 下载 in the Chinese, that users can click on the link and download this database, and it is updated every year when we do the annual update in December. Yeah, so here it is. This is the page for downloading it, and you just click on the database. Because with this, so what you will see, this is an example of like after you've downloaded the access database, you open it. And so the basic structure, of the poet, the work, and so on, you will see all of the data when you click on, say here is the poet. So all 7,700 plus of them would be in here with all of their biographical data in the columns. And so with that, with the access data, users have tried different things. And so here was a Chinese scholar, visiting scholar at Harvard, who did a word cloud visualization of the most frequently encountered seasons and flowers in the poem titles in Ming Qing women's writings. Well, not surprisingly, there are a lot of flowers and and seasonal words. So here is then back to sort of this is the basic entity tables, right, in MQWW. And so with the poet, you get all the biographical data of the poets, so 姓名字号, 生卒年, 籍贯, and their works, and so on. And then there's a notes field, which is not published in the public works site, and we may consider doing that in the future. And that is that the biographical information is not so complete in as data in MQWW. And so we have, when we have done research for each author as they come to the database, especially our graduate students have done the research to identify other information about each woman, and we would enter them in the notes field, and that's in our internal database, and it's the material that has not been published, but we are considering releasing that into the public website. And so with so that's with the access database. And in collaboration with 3DB, we have also created a link, an API application programming interface, so that one could actually click on each poet, and if there is information in CBDB for that poet, it would be returned in this form. And so during our collaboration, basically, we put all of the information, including the information in the notes field, so such as if the father of the poet is known, or mother, the name and dates and so on, or husband, brothers and sisters, etc. So even though it's not shown in MQWW, but through going to CBDB, you would be able to see here, for example, the 丈夫. This is for the famous song lyric poet Wu Zao, about whom actually not very much is known of her family. So that's how we have tried to sort of remedy some of the the shortcomings in our design. And another collaboration is more recent, is with Donald Sturgeon's the China text project, C-Text, where he has full text right on that website. Or what he has done more recently is to enable OCR conversion when you go to C-Text. And so in particular, all collections at the Harvard Yanjing Library have been digitized and available in C-Text. So if the collections that we got from Harvard Yanjing is in C-Text, and it could be OCR'd. So here's an example of it. However, it's not very good quality. So this collection is from the Harvard Yanjing Library. It is in MQWW. It's the 秀佛楼诗稿 by Qian Shoupu. It's actually this is probably a unique collection. I have not seen this collection in any libraries in China. But because this was the first batch that was digitized that initiated, this database and website, at that time, back in 2003, Harvard only did they only had funding for black and white, not color. So all the collections from Harvard are in black and white, scans, and not very high quality. So the OCR results are not so good. So on this, well, anyways, let me go back. On this page, the percentage of error is like 21%. So that you might as well then go and transcribe the text manually oneself, rather than trying to do the OCR and then have to correct all of these errors. So another collaboration that we have done more recently is with Dr. Lian Lingling at the Academia Sinica in the Jinshi, right? And this is a collaboration on looking at the transformations of talented women's culture in late Qing and modern China. So 才女文化的现代转型. So that period of intersection and interaction between tradition and modernity, because in our database, we have some overlaps with them. So women who lived, writers and poets in the late Qing who lived into the Republican period, but had classical education. So, and of course, in the Republican period, we have new print forms coming out, women's journals and magazines, and women were also publishing in those venues. And so we have this sort of, crossing of different forms of publication, but our focus, of course, is still on women who were educated and who wrote in the classical forms, but who were also then, moving in the modern currents, right? In the many times urban and new forms of publication. So I did a small paper actually at the 2022 AAS on 15 collections of women's all poetry collections that were published after the Qing. So in the Republican period, so you can see these dates, right? Some from the Qing into the 20s, and even this one was published in the 1930s. Zhang Zhaohan, those from Taiwan would be very familiar with this woman's work, who was also into politics and government. And so you see that some of these women, some of them died, even during the Qing, before the Republican period. And actually, in this, only a couple of them lived. So even Xue Shaohui died in 1911, and Zhang Zhaohan was the only one who lived into 1965. So here are, but like these are the some of the samples out of those 15 collections. So traditional woodblock, or actually a couple of them may be in the sort of qianyin. So, but they are made to look exactly like a woodblock, a traditional woodblock print. So with those 15 collections, I looked at, so these my student assistants did the visualization. So and so they here, oh, sorry. Yeah, so you see that there are these clusters. It's not a very good quality slide, unfortunately. I apologize for that. But this one, Chen Lifang at the center, is the woman poet, and then all of these names, I forget the exact number, but like scores of them, are people, both mostly men, but some women, who contributed, prefaces, and more of them contributed what's called a 题词. So usually translated as endorsement verse, sort of in celebration of the publication of this woman's work. And so here, we can see, well, we can look at them as a social network. But this certainly, was not the woman writer's own social network. She had already died, and so these to access social network through this data of what I would call paratext, the text written around the woman's own poetry collection, shows then really the people who were who actually got this collection published. And in her case, it was her grandson who had her collection published actually several decades after her death. So it would be, of course, if someone is interested in this man's social connections, and who they are, what kind of the movement, the regions, and so on and so forth. It has data here for researcher to follow. So another social network that I looked at is at the women poets themselves. So there we use a different sort of data, not the paratext written for them, but in their own collections, what we call the correspondence. So in the poetry collections, it is the poetic exchange, poems addressed to others, and poems addressed to them by others that show their own social network. And so these are the women who lived into the Republican period. So, for instance, Yang Lingfu, she was actually a very well-known painter, poet, and also art historian. She worked, so there's some new research done on her more recently. She worked at the Gugong in the 1920s. Her poetry collection, she actually has published several of them, but the first one was published in 1929, and it is the one that is in our database. But then you can see also how, her kind of social circle is it's more complex to get the data for this, because we have to it is all through the poem titles. Because we transcribe, that's the only thing that we do, is transcribe the titles of every piece of writing that is in the collections in this data base. So we, from that, and through keywords and so on and so forth. So that's how we arrived at, this visualization of the social network of women poets. Because I think there's some concern about timing too, so I'm going to just move fast through to the next slides, almost coming to the end. What we would, all right, so this is a a map that Professor Peter Bow, when we were collaborating, that he looked at the spatial distribution of, at that time, all the women that were in the database in 2013. And so you see the cluster of yellow bubbles, in the Jiangnan area. As we already, we know that was the region since the late Ming, where women's literary culture, women's education flourished, and it continues throughout the late imperial period. But we can also see that there were some pretty far-flung, yellow dots, right, way into Zhili in the north, northeast, and to the southwest in Guangxi, and so on. And so here it's data that that corroborates, right, the say impression. So here is hard data from one database, right, with the materials that we have. So what we would like to do, in like moving forward, some of the other things that we can develop is to set up an interactive maps on the MQWW website to enable users to see sort of geographical distributions of women authors across time. So you could, so whatever we have in the database, and also across time and across space, and you can also dig down, right, into not just the prefecture or whatever, but you click on it and going, closer and looking at, say, here it has Nanjing or Suzhou or and Hangzhou, like what the distributions are in that place and at different periods. So we hope to be able to develop this. So let me end then with a wish list, and in some ways it's like a dream list. Don't know how realizable this is in the short term, and but we always would like to expand the digital archive and the database of what are still extant collections of women's writings in the Ming and Qing and the Republican era by further collaboration. And so for this, we really need the help of librarians, right, who are familiar with the materials in their collection. And some of this would be, in the rare books sections, right, because they would be old materials, but Republican material, one can still come across it just in the sort of the putong, right, the regular books. They're not in rare books. And I would imagine that in North America, in the US, well, that university libraries that have large Chinese collections or substantial Chinese collections may, we don't know, because it's not like at Harvard, it was unusual in that there was a donation from Robert Hart of quite a large collection of rare books. And for some reason, there were more than 50 collections of women's writings in that. So it was like, all together, you didn't have to dig for it. But I did dig in there, in the Harvard Yanjing basement at that time to find another 40-some collections of women's writings that were not considered rare at that time. It was published in the 19th century, late 19th century, and so on. So if I would, it would be really great that if you all could keep an eye out, for the odd collection that might be hiding somewhere in your Chinese materials. And of course, it's always desirable to have a full search database, right? Full text searchable database. But the technology is still not quite there. And so that is something that we can dream about and keep in mind for future development. But we also want to, of course, improve the functionality better. We've done little changes, over the years, grouped the search page in different ways. And so if, any user, if users have suggestions from their experience of using the database, we welcome their suggestions. And also we are always open to collaboration, with other databases or other projects to build, cyber infrastructure for Chinese studies, into the future. So that's basically all I have to say today, and I welcome your questions and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, for the great presentation. Our Wikidata group actually has been utilizing the open data on Ming Qing women's writings for a long time, and really appreciate the open data. And today we've seen the future project goals and get to see the great visualizations. There are very helpful information for us. Actually, I've got two questions from my group members. One is, while we're creating Wikidata entries or Wikidata items for the women points we found in your database, we noticed that there are some of people they're now deeming were Republic of China dynasty, Republic of China that the time period. We found some examples like they're from Ming, they're from Song and Tang dynasty. Is that your goal of expanding the database to cover more time periods?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much for the question. Yes, I should have mentioned that. Yes, well, the database is called Ming Qing women's writings, because of course, most of the materials that we have extant are from the later periods. Of course, women wrote from a very long time ago. Some would claim that even the Shi Jing, some of the poems in the Shi Jing were written, quote, by women. At least it has a female voice, in the poems. We know Ban Zhao from the Han and Ban Jieyu and Li Qingzhao and so on and so forth, famous. But because of the these are such early periods and not a lot of attention or importance placed on women's writings, they were not preserved. Many were lost, right, or destroyed over time through wars and destruction and so on and so forth. I think what's left by women is from the early periods. Probably that's all we have. And the reason why we have Song and Tang and even maybe a few, 6 dynasties, women writers and so on, in the database is because there are several large anthologies, 总集,诗选, compiled by male editors, mostly in the late Ming, when printing began to flourish, and many anthologies of various sorts, and also Lei Shu compendia. So there was like a great interest in gathering and publishing anthologies and trying to preserve some works. I mean, this was done too in the of compiling women's writings into anthologies in the Tang, in the Song, because those many of them were just called 妇人集, women's collection, and the titles appear in the 艺文志, the bibliography of the dynastic histories. So we know those titles of the works they compiled, but the works themselves have not survived.
Okay.
So it's good that actually we have these. So like an examples would be, the anthology 名媛诗归, huge. I forget how many couple thousand poems that were selected into that anthology, and it's attributed to the well-known scholar literati Zhong Xin. So in the late Ming we have these, and so that's why we have these early women's poems. All of them, like just a handful, that have been preserved.
And also that's the reason why this database also includes some male writers as well, because this
for male writers, it's not because they were selected in anthologies, but because so these were male writers. It's really interesting too, because they were male writers who supported women's writing and publication. And so some of them would be the compilers themselves. So in terms of like an individual woman's writing, oftentimes it would be her male kin, right? Her whether it's brother or father, or there are many sort of individual circumstances. And so they were the ones who put the efforts into compiling, because women, were not, they were in the gui, in the boudoir, in the inner chambers at home, right? They did not go out. So these projects were usually carried out by male members of the family. And besides that, they also, many male scholars contributed to the publication of a woman's collection by writing a preface. For instance, they would be invited to write a preface, well-known scholars or not so well-known scholars. And as I mentioned earlier in the slides, there were many so-called 题词. When so in the Ming and Qing, whether it's publishing a male scholar's poetry collection or a female poets collection, the custom was to invite others to write a kind of congratulatory a verse on the publication. And so both men and women contributed to that. So we have the men, writing, writing those. But it's interesting too to see that women were themselves also taking up these roles, more than just being the poet, deep in her inner chambers writing or something, but they were also invited to write prefaces. Some of them are the more well-known. So the one that I showed, Guan Ying from Hangzhou. So if you look at the page when you see search her, and then that lists her work, and then it would say works by Guan Ying in this collection. And actually, I think she wrote at least 2, if not 3, different prefaces to other women's collection, which means that she was recognized, right, in her community, in her, in the social. She was a Hangzhou, from Hangzhou, and Hangzhou actually was very liberal, and there were many. It was a center of women's, literary production. Families were supportive, and so on, right? So we can see sort of these social phenomena, social changes, through by examining, right, the features in these women's collections.
Thank you, Grace. That's really helpful answers. I'll bring them back to my group. And we've got one question in the Q&A part. One of our audience has a question about writing. Does it refer to like the writing in the, I guess it's in the database name. Does it refer to traditional kinds of writings such as 诗, poetry, wen, essays, or it can encompass many other types of writing such as 新诗 in the early 20th century?
Such as what in the 20th century?
新诗, I guess
新诗,
Western style.
新诗, no. So that's the sort of the distinguishing characteristics of this women's database is that it is classical writings of different genres. So whether it's poetry or prose, or because we also see women writing besides prefaces, but mourning literature, 祭文, or they wrote a biography of another woman or of another man. So different genres of writing, but they are all in the classical language. So in other words, there is a divide, as we know, right, between the after the 五四, right, in the Republican periods, the advocacy of the vernacular of 白话 and writing in 新诗 and in vernacular and so on. So it is a very different culture, and so that when I mentioned the project of the 才女 project with Dr. Lian Lingling, at the 中研院, we are also, because it was a period when some of the women were in fact conversant in both the classical and the modern, right? And so we want to look at, or how did the classically trained women scholar and women poet, women writer, so how did their literary production sort of feature in, let's say, the 1920s and 1930s, or even beyond, right? So Zhang Zhaohan, she died in 1965, but she continued to write in classical verse her entire life. She moved to Taiwan after 1948, and was very culturally active in Taiwan. But yes, the database also then it gives it, it's a focus, right? There's so other databases where one can access works in modern Chinese. The other genre that we have quite a few examples of is so-called women's 谈词. These are like really long. I'm sure most people are familiar with Meng Qing, right? And 在生缘, that's one of the most famous 谈词 novels written by women, and it was a literature. So they're so long that it's very challenging and daunting to study, and certainly no one has translated a complete, 谈词. They're like excerpts in, say, in Will Idema and Vieira Grant's kind of translation of women's literature called The Red Brush, Writing Women of Imperial China. But that, still, it is women's literature, and it was written in 7-character verse, basically. It's a verse novel, 谈词, 七言, right? And yeah.
That's great. So we have 2 follow-up questions about your explanations. One is, it seems cross-reference name search might be a little, that is another question. Let me ask the follow-up first. So for the women who also wrote the Western style 新诗, are they all considered women poets, or women writer is more accurate to call them?
Oh, you mean those who wrote in modern? Well, I mean, in a way, is also dependent on how the woman in the Mingguo period, what we're talking about, or after that, or just
Sai, could you,
Sorry, I was actually asking, like in the database, the Ming Qing women's writings, those authors, like are there all like women poets or actually the women writers?
Oh,
Like,
I see. Majority are women poets, because in traditional China, in pre-20th century China, when prose was a male domain, because they had to their career trajectory is through the civil service examination system, to pass that and to to get an official position in the imperial bureaucracy. So in the gentry families and scholarly families, educated, the education of sons of the male members were very much focused on the Wen. Shi in the Tang dynasty was very important in the examination system, but in the later dynasties, especially Song and Ming, it fell out. It was sort of taken off from the examination requirement, and focused on the Sishu, right, the Wu Jing, though the Confucian canon. And they read the histories, the philosophies, and so on, all those prose. So women, because they were excluded, in fact, from writing, fundamentally. So it's amazing. It takes a lot of motivation, and also personal family context. If you have a conservative father who's opposed, or even a conservative mother who is opposed to any women's literacy, then the women had no way of actually getting educated, right, in that period. But because interestingly, Chinese poetry from the very beginning, from the Shi Jing, from the Book of Songs, you had the saying from the Greek preface, the Da Xu, is Shi Yan Zhi. Poetry expresses intent or emotion. So it's self-expression. So and the Shi Jing became a Confucian canon. So in a way, both men and women wrote poetry because in a way that this Confucian classic supported the writing of poetry for self-expression, for self-betterment, and so on and so forth. So it has been sort of used to this conception of poetry to legitimate women's entry into writing. So that's why we see writing by women was mostly in poetic genre, in poetry, in shi. But once they become literate, so there are women who were also interested, or they had the opportunity to, they learned how to write prose, but it became quite natural for women to say take up writing, to express interest. Not writing, to take up writing poetry, to learn how to write poetry, to express the desire, and then also have the sanction to do that if the family so allows. Whereas prose, well, they really have to be motivated by interest and literary talent to pursue the writing of prose, because it doesn't serve a practical a goal like it did for male scholars. So I think that's like kind of a simplified explanation of perhaps a much more complex, cultural issue on genres of writing that that are gendered. In a way, right? We don't think of it that way anymore, but in the societies in the past, very much. I think gender is, is a big issue in relation to literacy, to literary creation, and so on.
Thanks, Grace. We've got two more questions about the data visualization part. So the first question is, thank you for the interesting presentation. How did you and your students and collaborators create the visualization? And how did you select the data based on a research topic you conduct? Actually, the third question, which tool did you use?
Oh, okay. Well, see, I myself I'm a literary scholar, but I'm very interested in new sort of developments in digital humanities. Although I find it difficult. I don't have the time to learn the tools and so on. So in this field, I think collaboration is so important. So so what we have with the texts is that we can sort of get data out of, right? We have biographical data, at least so for instance, for every poet, every writer that is in our database, men or women, we have to have at least, I think, at least 4 sort of, 3 out of 4 data, basic data about them before we could create a person. So one is, of course, their name. One is the dates, but that often is the one that we don't have like exact dates, right? Maybe we can. So we are now, trying to get as close as possible from research, on the publication, on the content, of what is said about, at least to get a sense of what we use is the reign period. So which empress, whether is it Qianlong? If it's Qianlong, it's actually a little bit of a headache because Qianlong, he was emperor from 1736 to 1796 or something like that, right? 60 years. And so, when you say somebody lived in the Qianlong period, well, like which period, which part of that period, and did the person live a long life or whatever? So we have name, dates, region, right? Native region. What is their jiguan? Which part, of which county, which district are they identified with? And of course, gender, right? Was this a woman or a man? And sometimes it is a little bit ambiguous if it's not, identified, right? So we have those data. With data then, okay. So for the geographical visualization, they should actually go back, or you could maybe visualize what I showed before of the maps with the bubbles, right? So would be like, we would have entered the native region of every poet, man or women, in the database. But we can also separate them and only visualize the women, which is, I think, what Peter Bow did, and not include the men. And use GIS. ArcGIS or different forms. I think now there are some easier to use GIS or other, to do the geographical distribution, right? The spatial distribution. For social network analysis, my student assistants, the ones that I showed today, they used Gephi actually for the visualization of the social network. In that slide, if you go back to look at it, for when we created the Access database, we have the Ming Qing Women's Writings MySQL database, which then all the data is dumped into the Access, and then underneath that, you see we listed several sort of programs that people would use. I mean, you can just put them into Excel and do whatever you want with that, right? From Access, export the data into Excel and then use it for your own interest and purpose. So they, I think one of the programs that my postdoc used, because he was a social sciences person, was called SPSS, and that would tell you, I don't know, I say, I can't do it. I just tell him what I'm interested in, the problem, the question that I have. And I know what data we have and they can use. So we collaborate. And so for that SPSS is that he looks at the percentage. So we did a project together to test, okay, women's involvement in comparison. So that one was with writing prefaces. So we looked at 3 periods because the Ming Qing transition, that's the 17th century. We don't have so many. I think we only have 1 or 2 collections because very rare materials. None of the libraries we collaborated with had any, and in fact, very few survived. So we looked at the 18th century, High Qing, and then 19th century, the Late Qing, and then into the Republican period. So he saw, from the data, we said how many women wrote prefaces to poetry collections compared to how many men wrote prefaces to women's collections. And we saw that, of course, through all periods, more men wrote prefaces for women's collections than women wrote prefaces for women's collections. Because, as I was saying, prose was, most of them were not trained in writing prose. However, from the collections that did include prefaces written by women for other women, that there was an percentage increase over the 2 centuries, like from the 18th century, there was, I forget the percentage, and then the 19th century had more women writing. So in other words, what does this, well, we see this increase. And if we want to maybe dig deeper and think about, okay, wow, did this increase all kind of focus in one area, come from one area, or did it, is it spread out over different areas? Or so you can do further. You get the overall view, and then you can ask further questions to find out what is driving, this phenomenon, right? That's just an example.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. We're a little over time, but I feel like this is a great opportunity. I want all the questions answers. Do you still have 1 or 2 minutes for 2 questions? So can I ask one more question, Grace?
Okay, sure.
Okay, this question seems to from one of our regular user of your database. It seems that the cross-reference name search might be a little challenging, and this person gave an example. If they search person name for Liu Shi, but they can search person name for Liu Shi, but search for Liu Rushi didn't find anything. Also, Gu Taiqing versus Gu Zichun. Is there a way to improve this?
Oh yeah, actually, yes, we have to be creative, and also, in the searches for names, because actually so we put right, what, because it's data and there are different categories, right? So we can only put one sort of like the official name, right? Gu Taichun or Gu Taiqing or Gu Chun. Actually, I forget what is it. But what you should do is that we put every style name, 字 or 号, that is known. So courtesy name or style name for any writer, woman or man. If we encounter it, oh, she's also known as, Xilin, Tai Qing, or so just don't put the thing as like if you put, if it was entered her name as Gu Chun and you could put Gu Tai Qing, then it won't. But if you put Tai Qing, you would find you know, her and others that may have that that courtesy name or style name. So yes, I think they you know, Xing Ming, you know, is a 任意 so you try different also for you know, for poem titles and thing and so on, try like different combinations perhaps that might get you the search results.
Okay. Thank you, Grace. One last quick question. Do you plan to do some linked open data project for the database?
Yeah, well, I'm not quite sure what that, you know, would entail or what that means. I don't know, Xiaoli, right, was so is that, I mean, there's a huge project in Canada by not Chinese scholars or about Chinese, but they were interested in linking women's, right, from like England, France, or whatever. And they did approach us, but the linguistic differences, I think, of Chinese language posed a difficulty for that. And so what, so can you enlighten me as to like what you have in mind about linked open data? One of you or your colleagues, can you elaborate on that?
Ellie, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. Okay, let me change to my headset so you can hear me better.
Hi, Xiaoli. Good to see you again.
We've been contact each other for so long. Finally, see you in virtually, but at least see you. So I think it's very nice. Thank you so much for making this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what the person exact the one, but I think from a data provider perspective, when they ask if you're prepared to make your data linked open data, I can think of a couple possible things maybe could be done. One is make your data become a set up what we call the endpoints. Then the users could do Sparkle query. I can send those terms to you if it's unfamiliar to you, meaning they can do more in-depth of query of your database in addition to what you provided, just a regular search. But that would require you publishing your data in a linked data format.
Oh, so in other words, the access data does not serve this purpose, because all our data you know, is provided in the access downloadable. So if a user takes the data from that, would that serve this purpose?
Yeah, I think if user take that data, they can probably do the whichever format they want to transform into, but that will require user have a maybe strong programming knowledge, or at least will have access to server, big sort of database to do so. So thinking about the linked open data, one of the example, if you are interested, you could look at how Wikidata work.
Okay.
So Wikidata, they have sort of very simple searching, but a user can do very in-depth of query. So for example, one of query people might be able to do is they could say, give me all the women poets who was born in maybe early Qing or later Qing, and was also born in a particular city.
Oh, okay.
They can do that type of very in-depth of search query to get the data set out without even need to do anything themselves.
Uh-huh.
So that would be one of potential use as an individual user. But
Mhm.
when you look at the internet as a web of data, if you publish your database as a linked data, then you're basically speaking the web language. Then will be much easier for you to, or for others building service around your data set. So I think that is a couple of things I think it's why the linked open data might be further enhance or promoting the use of the valuable resource you have been put together.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. A direction to kind of consider. But another question is like, what does it take? What kind of work does it require to what do you say it would be what to publish the data as linked open data.
Yeah, it probably will require a couple things. One, your group have to choose what type of linked data schema you want to use. So then you will know how your data will map into that linked data format. So that will be maybe one of the things need to consider. And the second is what type of storage you might use to store your converted data, because there's so many different storage you can use. You can store it as we call the knowledge graph, meaning the data stored not like the relational database. It's more like a tree and a graph structure. So you need to also think about what storage you might be use. And then once you have those, then you have to think about what APIs you need building around to support those use. So I know some library to make it maybe relatively easy, they would just select it's one of existing package things called the Wikibase. So when you use Wikibase comes with different features and different tools. You could just modify and use it. So that is, I think, is a cloud-based, which means you probably don't even need your own storage. You just need to put your data in and then work that way. So there is a couple possibility. If you are interested, there's a lot of linked data experts in the library community, maybe even in McGill Library. They can help you to go through those. But one of libraries that are listed in the US has a lot of experience like this is our Library of Congress. Because they publish their authority data, which are people, subject, name, locations, geographic location, and so on, and publish it as linked data.
That's really great information for me to know. But
actually, Shani, so the project we'll be working based on the Ming Qing women's writings. Like we use Wikidata to store to store the or recreate or convert the data originally from Ming Qing women's writings. So that's one way of like a relatively no barrier way of converting like the database data to link open data. The project we have been doing around the group.
Right. So actually then for me, the complication would be that, well, as you know, I'm an academic. I'm not a librarian. And also the and Ming Qing women's writings is actually in our library collection, right? It's a digital collection. And so the library, you know, they have sort of, in a way, they have control over the technical development part of the database. So I cannot say, oh, I want to. Actually, I did explore with them. You know, when we were really thinking hard about full text, and you know, it had been suggested to me that, well, maybe we should try crowdsourcing. You know, so many users of Ming Qing women's writings, so they could just transcribe, and we can, you know, then collect the full text in the libraries. That no, there's security issues. We don't, you know, allow that. Also, storage issues. So it's a whole like system. I would have to find out how, you know, they consider this. I don't know whether we are very at this moment looking up, because our previous liaison librarian for East Asian Studies for CJK, right, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, retired, Macy Zhang. I don't know if anyone. And so we have just hired or appointed, I should say, a new liaison, or the library has appointed, and I think she might even be at this webinar today. Hei Jin Jun, who will be coming from Notre Dame University Library to McGill this August. And so I'm really looking forward to working with her, and then maybe together we can you know, find, because she's the librarian and has the, you know, library part, because the library is completely separate from the, you know, the different faculties. I'm in the Faculty of Arts, you know, in this department, and so on. So we could you know, I would have a someone to kind of discuss and to brainstorm and to, you know, think about you know, these issues, and she would have the insight from the library side. Yeah, and so right now too, we just also, the library just appointed a new, well, we call them dean, the dean of directors, last fall. So a lot of changes. This new dean apparently is very much interested in digital, you know, developments. We have not yet, you know, but she's been, and the library is going through a huge reorganization of space and renovation and so on. So it seems like a lot of their energies are absorbed there. So books are being moved off-site. It's a new development, off-site storage and so on. But I think it is also can be looked at as a transition and a new beginning. So I hope I'm hopeful. Yeah. So thank you for the suggestion, and I would definitely yeah, keep that in mind, and to try to find out more. I think your group approached the librarian at McGill about some copyright issues, and they approached me, and I gave them the answer as to what I understand, but I did not hear any follow-up from. I don't know whether you got the answers that you you know, that you wanted for your questions. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Grace. We haven't heard back from the copyright librarian, but we can follow up with her maybe later. Yeah, but we are over time. I feel like I'm a bad coordinator. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. And thank you for your great questions and your engagement throughout the session. And once again, thank you, Grace, for your enlightening presentation. We appreciate your time and your expertise. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for your support to this Kala speaker series. And we will upload the slides and recording hopefully this week. I hope you found the speaker series informative and valuable. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
I will send a follow-up email.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, great. And everybody. Yeah. So have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.